Rafael Nadal, the most relentless competitor tennis has ever seen, was caught on camera crying. Not after a loss. Not in some post-retirement interview. He was sitting at home in Mallorca, watching a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines collapse to the ground on the other side of the world, racket in hand, tears flooding her face. And Rafa just broke. The video hit the internet like a detonation. Millions of views inside hours. People who hadn't thought about tennis in years suddenly couldn't put their phones down. Everyone asking the same question: who is she? And why does she mean that much to him? I'm going to tell you. And I promise it goes so much deeper than you expect. Imagine the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca. Sun-baked clay courts. Rigid schedules. Elite juniors from across Europe putting their bodies through daily punishment under a Mediterranean sky that offers no sympathy. This is not a soft place. It was built on grit, built on repetition, built on the belief that champions are forged, not discovered. In 2016, a 12-year-old girl from Manila walked through those gates with one bag and a dream that was probably too big for the bag to hold. Her name was Alex Eala, and almost nobody knew what to make of her. She was quiet. She was small. She came from a country where tennis doesn't own the national conversation, where infrastructure is limited, where the road to professional tennis is genuinely, structurally harder than anything most European juniors would ever have to navigate. No famous family name. No generational bloodline in the sport. No safety net of any kind. What she had was a scholarship and a willingness to suffer for something she loved. The academy doesn't soften things for scholarship athletes. If anything, the bar is higher. Every morning you wake up and prove you belong against kids backed by family wealth, established coaching networks, connections that reach across the entire European junior circuit. Eala trained anyway. She lost matches that should have gone her way. She dragged herself back to a dormitory room in a foreign country, exhausted and sometimes heartbroken, and showed up the next morning before the sun was fully up, ready to go again. That kind of quiet, stubborn, unbreakable will doesn't go unnoticed, not even by the greatest champion the sport has ever produced. Between his own tournaments and comebacks and injury battles, Rafael Nadal began watching her develop. Nothing formal, yet no courtside clipboard, no official coaching arrangement. He simply observed, and what he saw in this young Filipino girl rang something familiar inside him, something from his own earliest years on those exact same courts. She didn't fold under pressure. She absorbed it, transformed it, used it. By 2026, she was a junior Grand Slam champion, winning the Australian Open girls title with a brand of tennis that made commentators search for words beyond their usual vocabulary. By 2023, she was stepping into the professional circuit, taking on opponents who were older, stronger, more experienced, and ranked hundreds off places above her in every measurable category. She lost many of those matches. She came back for every single one. Nobody handed Alex Eala a single point she didn't fight for with everything she had. March 2026. Miami Open. One of the biggest hardcore events on the WTA calendar. Eala arrived as a wild card. World ranking 140. Statistically, she had no business in that draw. It was packed with former Slam champions. Top 10 stalwarts, players who had been operating at elite level for years. She beat Madison Keys in the second round. Composed. Clinical beyond her years. The tennis world raised an eyebrow. She beat Jelena Ostapenko in the third, a former Roland Garros champion whose explosive, chaotic ball-striking scrambles the minds of seasoned professionals. Eala adapted mid-match, refused to panic, and walked off the court having handled it. Both eyebrows fully raised. Then came the quarterfinal. Iga Swiatek. World number 2. Multiple Grand Slam champion. Arguably the most dominant force in women's tennis over the preceding 3 years, the kind of player whose mental consistency had reduced opponents to rubble on every surface, in every condition imaginable. Eala defeated her in straight sets. The tennis internet short-circuited. Clips spread across every platform at once. Former players issued public statements of astonishment. Broadcast journalists scrambled for words that fit. The word generational appeared in commentary feeds at a frequency that suggested nobody had a better option. Then came the private message. Rafael Nadal, who had officially retired from professional tennis the previous November in a farewell ceremony that left the sport genuinely grieving, reached out to Eala directly. The contents weren't made public immediately, but in a brief post-match interview that itself went viral within minutes, she referenced hearing from Rafa with an expression that communicated something private, overwhelming, and entirely real. She said she was grateful. She said his words meant something she couldn't fully put into words in a press conference, setting the world understood anyway, because everyone who had watched her that week had already seen it. The left-handed forehand hit with topspin and controlled aggression, the refusal to surrender baseline exchanges, the almost supernatural ability to elevate when the pressure became most unbearable. She played like someone who had been taught the right things at a deep level. Not from a coaching manual, from a man who had lived every principle she was demonstrating. Rafa had poured that understanding into her years before this moment. Miami was simply when the world finally saw what it had produced. June 2025. Eastbourne, England. Grass court season. 2 weeks before Wimbledon. Eala reached the final. Championship points arrived. She was one shot, one single, clean, executable shot from lifting her first WTA title. She missed it. Then the next one. The match turned. The momentum evaporated with the specific, surgical cruelty that only tennis can manufacture. The opponent leaned in. The crowd, which had been loudly behind her, went tense with that particular silence that falls when something terrible is unfolding and no one has the power to stop it. Eala lost. She sat in her chair at the changeover and wept. Not composed weeping, not tears managed for the cameras. She wept the way a person weeps when they've given everything and still fallen short, raw, unconcealed, entirely human. Nothing to do with strategy or optics or professional expectation. The cameras caught it. The clip spread immediately. And in Mallorca, on his phone, Rafael Nadal saw it. He reshared the footage. For words alongside it. For words that, depending on your relationship with sport, with loss, with the particular ache of almost, will either tighten your chest, fill your eyes, or both at the same time. She will be back. No analysis. No suggestions for improvement. No carefully managed public statement. Just 4 words from a man who had lost Wimbledon finals of his own, who understood championship. Point collapses from both sides of the emotional divide, who knew exactly what Alex Eala was sitting with in that moment, and wanted her and the entire watching world to hear one unambiguous truth. She would be back. The comments numbered in the hundreds of thousands within 2 days. Tennis fans, Filipino supporters, Nadal devotees, people who couldn't name a single current player on tour. All of them gathered beneath 4 words, and the weight they carried. September 2025, Guadalajara, Mexico. WTA 250 event. Late season hard courts, the kind of tournament where careers quietly pivot on results that don't always get the coverage they deserve. Eala entered the final having ground through a 3-set semifinal the day before she was visibly drained. Neutral observers were cautious. Talented, yes. Miami. On the resume, yes. But finals carry a psychological weight that no prior evidence can fully prepare you for. Eastbourne had already proven that. She lost the first set. For about 8 minutes into the second, it looked like the story might repeat itself. The opponent sensed the opportunity and started constructing points with growing confidence. The crowd grew quieter, and then something shifted inside Alex Eala. Nobody watching could pinpoint the exact moment. No dramatic gesture, no visible release, no coaching intervention. She simply changed the cautious hesitation of the first set, replaced by something controlled and ferocious and utterly decisive. Her opponent had no comfortable ground to stand on. She won the second set. She won the third. She won the championship. And when the final point landed and the reality of it arrived in her body all at once, 3 years of sacrifice, dormitory nights in Mallorca, junior losses, professional setbacks, Miami upsets, and Eastbourne heartbreak all arriving simultaneously, Alex Eala dropped to the court, face buried in her hands, racket somewhere beside her, completely overtaken. She stayed there a long time. The crowd in Guadalajara gave her every second. And in Mallorca, the retired champion who had poured his principles and his competitive philosophy and his genuine belief into this young woman across an entire decade watched the footage on his screen and felt something crack open in his chest. The video of Rafa's reaction went viral within the hour. Tens of millions of views. Headlines across 40 countries. Journalists who covered tennis and journalists who absolutely did not, all of them writing the same sentence in different languages. Rafael Nadal broke down watching Alex Eala win November 2025, exactly 12 months after the most emotionally devastating retirement in professional tennis history. Rafael Nadal walked back onto a practice court, no tournament, no cameras, no press obligation or PR arrangement, just practice clothes, 2 rackets, and one other person, Alexandra Eala. They practiced together for 2 hours. What emerged afterward through sources close to both, and eventually through Eala herself in a candid interview, described a session that was technical and emotional, structured and spontaneous, professional and deeply personal all at once. Nadal worked specifically on her forehand. Grip pressure at contact. Follow-through angle. Weight transfer into the ball, the mechanics that generate topspin without losing directional control. Not abstract concepts. The precise details that separate a good forehand from a historic one. Details he had spent 20 years perfecting on clay, grass, and hard courts against the finest opponents the sport had ever seen. He was giving her the blueprint. Eala said afterward that she spent portions of the session convincing herself it was actually happening. That the person standing across the net, feeding her balls and offering technical feedback with the authority of someone who owns 22 Grand Slam titles, was the same person whose name was on the building around them. She described one specific moment, a rally where Nadal demonstrated the forehand approach himself. Still moving with the careful deliberateness of a man protecting surgically repaired joints, but striking the ball with a quality that reminded everyone watching why the greatest ever conversation always circles back to his name. She said she stopped moving entirely. Just watched. Let the ball go past. He laughed and told her to keep playing. She said she almost couldn't. That clip traveled differently than the Guadalajara video. Less explosive. More tender. The response that landed hardest came from ordinary people. Fans who had genuinely grieved Nadal's retirement, who had felt his absence from tour as something personal, suddenly confronted with the image of him on a court again, not competing but transferring, giving everything he'd learned to the person most capable of carrying it forward. The torch hadn't simply been passed. It had been lit together. Rafael Nadal broke down crying. Alex Eala raised a trophy. And the world stopped everything to watch two people separated by nationality, by generation, by a retirement ceremony that had felt so final, share a single extraordinary moment that tennis had never quite produced before. This isn't a story about one match, or one viral clip, or one emotional reaction on someone's phone. This is a story about what happens when genuine belief meets genuine effort quietly, unglamorously, across a full decade of work and finally arrives in front of the entire world. The girl from Manila became a champion. The champion from Mallorca broke down watching it happen.